Well, time for some business news now, and Brian Quinn is with us in studio for that. Let's head over to him here. He's across at the big screen. Brian, we're going to start. Good morning, Brian. We're going to start with that new free trade agreement between the US, Canada, and Mexico, the new NAFTA.
That's right, the U.S., Mexico, Canada agreement that will replace 1994's North American Free Trade Agreement is indeed being hailed by Washington, Ottawa, and Mexico City as disaster has been avoided at the last minute amid Donald Trump's hardball strategy on trade. Well, U.S. dairy and auto industry representatives are optimistic as the deal opens a foothold in Canada's protected dairy market and avoids damaging auto tariffs. Though Trump's prediction of hundreds of thousands of U.S. jobs from the deal are likely years away. Well, one key issue left unresolved in the deal is the Trump administration's global tariffs of 25% on steel and 10% on aluminum coming into the U.S. Both Canada and Mexico have indicated that those tariffs will have to be lifted for them before the deal can be signed on November 30th. Here's Canada's lead negotiator.
We have felt from day one that trade in steel between Canada and the United States is balanced and mutually beneficial. As you know, the United States has a slight surplus, in fact. And we think the best outcome, the best economic outcome for both countries would be for both countries to remove those tariffs. That's something that we've been actively discussing with the United States since the imposition of the tariffs. We're going to continue to do that.
Well, that North American trade progress lifted markets yesterday, but the boost seems to be fading on Tuesday. European indexes opening in the red as investors look to corporate earnings. London's FTSE 100 opening down 0.4%. The CAC 40 here in Paris off 0.6. Frankfurt DAX off just over 0.8%. Escalating U.S.-China trade tensions weighing down Asian markets on Tuesday. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index losing that's over 2%, 2.3% at the close there. Korea's Kospi sliding around 1.25%, despite improving GDP forecasts as the country's jobless rate continues to rise. Now, Tokyo's Nikkei Index, the one bright spot, closing at a 27-year high for the second day in a row, up just 0.1%, though. Well, next, it's one of the biggest events of the year for the global car industry. The Paris Motor Show opens to journalists today. More than 1 million people are expected to attend the event when it opens to the public on Thursday. Our business editor, Stephen Carroll, is on hand at the show. He joins us live now. Stephen, the auto industry overall is booming. What are we expecting to see at the show this year?
Well, car makers are certainly in a good mood going into this Paris Motor Show. They've had 8 consecutive years of growth in car sales, 3% predicted this year. And although we're seeing some signs of a slowdown, it's still a fairly strong position for most of the global car industry. We're expecting, according to a study by Euler Hermes, we're expecting to surpass the 100 million units sold for the first time in 2019. There are, of course, some clouds on the horizon there as well. Those trade tensions, and particularly the tariffs on steel and aluminium, causing difficulty for car makers. We've seen warnings about lower profit margins from BMW, among others. They stand here behind me today as they unveil their latest cars, but also increased regulation in the wake of the Volkswagen emissions scandal. We've seen new European regulations on emissions testing, which is costing car makers more money as they bring their cars into code with that. And also what we've seen as a trend emerging, particularly among German cities, of banning older diesel cars. We know also there's been promises from the UK and France to phase out diesel cars over the next coming years. So to prepare for that, we're seeing an awful lot more interest in electric vehicles. Certainly wandering around the salon this morning here at the Paris Motor Show, I've seen many more electric and hybrid cars than I have in previous years, and that's really a signal of the investment that car makers are putting into it. And it is a significant investment because building electric cars costs an awful lot more. They still only account for around 1% of the global car markets. There is a huge gap for car makers to make up, both in production terms but also in sales terms, to try and get people to buy those sorts of cars. We're expecting lots more announcements of electric cars, but of course at this stage we know that without public subsidies, motorists aren't really interested on a large scale in switching to electric cars, so car makers will be doing their best to try and encourage them to do that.
Right, we'll probably see that market grow a bit in recent times. Now, there are some noticeable absences from this year's event. Why is it some brands are skipping the show?
Quite a lot of them, in fact. Volkswagen, Fiat, Ford, none of them are present here at the Paris Motor Show. And that's really also a signal of how this industry is shifting and adapting to newer challenges. It's a very expensive outlay for a company to come and set up at an event like this. And many of them are simply choosing to spend their money elsewhere on side events, on online marketing, rather than coming here. The organisers are expecting that there will be fewer people attending the Paris Car Show this year. It's traditionally been the biggest event by numbers in terms of who comes to the actual event here to see the new cars, and car makers are simply finding that their money can be better spent on marketing those cars online rather than in person for events like this. Now, the event itself is adapting to cater for that, I suppose. There are now separate side events for technology and motoring, of course a big development, especially with issues like self-driving cars, and also a special section for startups, for all those companies that are coming up with side businesses which will be part of the overall transformation of the motor industry.
All right, well, 1 million people still expected to attend. We'll keep an eye on it. Stephen will be back at 1 with more live from the Paris Motor Show. That's it for business. Back to you, Eve.
OK, thanks a lot. And that